And all right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Raising Hell in Jersey. I'm your host, Jake Wakely. Joe is going to be joining us here shortly, and he's just finishing up a couple things. And Devil's State of the Mind podcast is going to be joining us to discuss some sort of big news that was put out into the hockey world today. I just have to send him the invite now as we speak. But, Alex, how you doing tonight, man?
Pretty good. How about you?
Good. So do you want to just sort of dive into it a little bit, or do you have an article coming out you want to sort of talk about?
So I don't have any articles specifically on, the whole Nikola Ehlers, Patrick Laine thing yet. I'm working on something about who the Devils could pick with the 20th pick. If kind of looking right now like the Canucks could be done. So got something in the work there, but that's not even close to finished yet. So, I guess we could talk about it a little bit, but, it depends.
Yeah, I think, maybe we'll get into it. I want to wait until the guys are on, actually, because, I got a lot of my buddies are, Montreal Canadiens fans, but one of my buddies, he follows the Devils, quite a bit, because obviously me being a fan and whatnot. And the question that he wants all of us to sort of answer tonight on the podcast.
Oh, all right.
Maybe, actually, I'll start with you. I'll ask you first because everybody else is busy. Like, apparently, I think Joe's still eating his supper. Like, who eats their because he sent me a picture of a salad.
Late dinner, I guess.
I guess, yeah. I was thinking, who eats dinner at 9 o'clock at night? Like, I warned you that the podcast was happening at 9 p.m. between 9 and 9:30, but, it is what it is. So my buddy Brian, what we call him Cheesy because he owns a pizza place. But anyway,
nice.
That's besides the point. What players do you think might be targets from the Devils roster for the Seattle Kraken that Seattle might think about taking from the Devils?
So, I mean, I guess if the Devils don't buy out Corey Schneider now, I think that's probably the obvious one. I don't know what the Devils, it might depend a little bit on what they do at the draft now. If they take Marco Rossi with the 7th pick, I could see like maybe them exposing Pavel Zacha to the expansion draft. Because then you're kind of set down the middle with Rossi, Hischier, and Hughes for a long time. I guess PK Subban would be another one. He'd have 1 year left on his deal at the time of the expansion draft, and if he doesn't bounce back for the next season, I could see the Devils maybe exposing him to the draft or to the expansion draft and maybe trying to get rid of that $9 million cap hit.
Anyway, Neil, sorry.
Yeah.
Welcome on.
Hey.
On. I know you got your own podcast that you do for Devils fans. I've listened to mostly all your guys' episodes. Big fan of the work you guys do.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's always good to have all the Devils fans happy and together and talking Devils hockey all the time, right? So
yeah.
I brought you on, because it's always good to have, you brought Joe on the podcast and stuff like that. And, I want to get on your podcast at some point. I got to figure out a time, like after 4:30 during the week, that works and at night, because it's easier for me at nighttime because of, I got a child that just became a father about 2 months ago. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So we were just, before we get into, like why I brought you on and what I want you to discuss, we were just talking, my buddy's a big Montreal Canadiens fan, but he sort of follows the Devils a little bit, for my sake of the doubt. And he was asking, what players do you see Seattle taking from the Devils come the expansion draft?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you guys so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. Obviously big fan of you guys as well. To answer that question, I think the two guys that I look at the most that could be exposed is probably either Corey Schneider or PK Subban. I think for a lot of Devils fans, they look at it and they say, well, PK Subban for another year or two has about $9 million that he's taking up of the cap space. And obviously, considering he had quite the down year, to say the least, in his first year in New Jersey, it makes it more, for more fans to be like, oh, well, it's a no-brainer. Let's move on from PK. I think a lot of it will have to depend on, how PK plays under Lindy Ruff this year. I think the Devils will give him another opportunity, as they should. And I think the same could be said for Corey Schneider. Corey Schneider is making $6 million this year, and then he makes $6 million the following season, and then his contract is up. And I think, again, same thing with PK. Corey is going to have to prove himself that he is worthy of being on this team. But I think most likely when we get to the expansion draft, the year following this upcoming one, I think it wouldn't be a surprise to see one of those two guys be left available for the expansion draft. I think because of who PK Subban is, his personality, how marketable he is, unless the Devils feel comfortable keeping him, for another year, trying to help this team take that next step. I think for Seattle to try to get some fans, and some new hockey fans, I think having a guy like PK Subban would be great. For the online presence, for, the personality wise, like I mentioned before. But yeah, I think Corey Schneider or PK Subban would probably be one of the two guys that would be moved. But again, there's a lot of time between then and now. So we don't have to make any decisions now or any determinations to what we think. But I think just judging from the standpoint now, probably one of those two guys. But obviously, a lot can change by that point.
Okay, so this kind of raises my next question, continuing on that subject for both of you guys. Do you, Joe and I discussed it on our last episode. We did a Q&A. So, I was hesitant on it because it's cap hit and whatnot. I don't know. Is it safe to say, is PK Subban on this roster by the end of next season?
It's a really good question. I'll go second on this one.
I think if he's not gonna get back to like the Norris level defender he was a couple of years ago, but I think if he rebounds this season and he's a significant contributor as like maybe a second pair offensive defenseman, then yeah, I think they'll try and maybe keep him for that final season of his contract. If he has another bad season like he did last year, then yeah, I think it'll probably be the last season with him in the Devils uniform.
I mean, I pretty much would agree with that. Again, I think the Devils will give PK Subban a chance to redeem himself. Obviously you have a new coaching staff that's going to be coming in. There is the possibility that Alain Nasreddine could stay on as an assistant with Lindy Ruff, but we don't know, what the situation is necessarily with that at the moment. But I think PK will be given an opportunity. I can't say whether or not he will be on the team by the end of this next season, but I'm a pretty optimistic person, as you can tell by a lot of my tweets and a lot of things I talk about on Devil's State of Mind. So I would say that I think PK will have there's about a 75% chance, in my opinion, that he will probably be on the team going into the year after this year. I think also another reason is simply that you look at the fact that we'll probably have one, maybe two of our defensemen from the current system coming up this year. Probably Ty Smith, maybe Kevin Ball as well, depending on how things go in training camp. And they'll need more. They'll need a lot of time to develop and learn the game. And having a veteran presence like PK Subban, probably you could safely say that he's maybe your your best offensive defenseman, but I mean, you could argue that Damon Severson could be a little bit more consistent over the last couple of years. But I think at the end of the day, I think PK Subban, considering the fact that we may not have very many options after this next season, I think PK Subban has a 75% chance of being on this team the year after. But again, it all just depends on how he comes out and how he adjusts to a different style, a more offensive style of play that Lindy Ruff is supposed to bring in with him and his coaching staff.
Yeah, I think should we expect maybe a bounce back from Subban? I would say yes, but he's definitely going to have more than 18 points. I think we can count that. He's going to have. I'll be shocked if he has that amount. But I also think it's going to depend on. PK's not going to be the PK he was in Montreal or when he first got to Nashville. People also have to remember that you also had to factor in his talent aside, even when he was younger, who he was playing with. Like half the time when he was in Montreal, he was either playing with Alexei Emelin or he was mostly paired with Andrei Markov. Right. Now, Markov's probably one of the most underrated defensemen when he was in his career. I don't think he got a lot of credit, even though he was in one of the biggest hockey markets in the world, if not the biggest. But when Subban was in Nashville, though, I think wasn't Subban playing with Ekholm or Yossi?
He was playing mostly with Roman Yossi on the top pairing, from what I remember. And I think what's really interesting is that he's the type of guy that needs more of a defensive defenseman to be paired with him because, and this is going to be very critical of PK, he's never been a big defensive defenseman. He's mainly an offensive defenseman. We've seen it for years where he is just, really good on the power play with that big slap shot. He likes to, move the puck up like he's a third, he's a fourth forward on the ice. So I think, with whomever the Devils decide to pair with him, I hope is a little bit more defensive than PK just because of the fact that I don't think PK is, I guess you would say, not interested in maybe being, more defensive. But it could change, again, depending on what happens with this new coaching staff. But, it's just, from my evaluation, I think having a more defensive defenseman be paired with him would probably be the smartest move.
Okay, so before I
Homer Simpson joining in on this.
I am here.
There he is.
Here.
All right.
Oh my.
Okay. So that's Joe, but he only did that because we
put a prank on him since he pulled a Ron Burgundy on me.
Yeah, I put myself as Ron Burgundy on his last podcast. So that's why.
Oh my god. Nice.
Anyway, before we lead into our topics, I was waiting for Joe to come on before we discussed it, but Neil, is it safe to say? I know you said Schneider's got to prove himself, but how many chances does this organization have to give him? Honestly, he looks like it. I know preseason's different because the rosters aren't always the greatest. You're playing your prospects. You want to see what you have in young guys. Is it safe to say that Corey Schneider's course with the Devils organization has basically run its course? It's time to move on.
I think that's a fair question to ask because obviously you've seen over the last couple of years, there's been times where he's looked like he's the Corey of old that we saw a couple of years ago when we first acquired him, and then he gets hurt again. I think, you saw how he finished, his second stint in Binghamton, and then over, 2 or 3 games he played prior to the stoppage this year, he looked like he was getting back to the form that we had seen before. Again, I think this really should be Corey's last chance because after this year, he'll only have 1 year left on his deal. And by that point, you have to make that decision, kind of like with